Dealing with the legacy of software. Now, in dealing with legacy of the software, we must know these three important things. First, existing software must evolve because the requirements change as time goes by. Second, re-engineering. And third, reverse engineering. Re-engineering is a process through which an existing system undergoes an alteration to be reconstituted into a new form. A sample of this would be a wired headset transformed into a wireless headset. While reverse engineering from an existing system to its documentation, which may not exist or may be incomplete, includes a program understanding preventive maintenance. An example of this is when an iPhone launched their new model, which is copied by a Chinese or a China manufacturer and with the same specs but given in a low price. Now, case study. Case study is a process of record of research in which detailed consideration is given to the development of particular person, group, or situation over a period of time. This moment, we will study 4 case studies that we can aid for us to know more about these things. First case study is the telephone switching system. Second is the budget control system. Third is the Microsoft synchronized and stabilized process. And fourth is the open source approach. We can see that the first study exemplifies complex systems with stringent reliability and efficiency requirements, while the second study typifies a system in which interaction with the end user. While the other two, the third and fourth study, are for larger scale efforts in the next decade. These are based on different principles and goals. Without further ado, the first case study is a telephone switching system. A company had developed one of the first digital switches in the world and had already sold many systems making use of the system. The major characteristics are they have complex functional specs, there is need to interface a large input-output system with tens of thousands of lines and to process thousands of calls in parallel with responses times well under 1 second. They provide an uninterrupted service in the presence of intermittent and permanent hardware and software faults. The study followed the classic waterfall model primarily because the problem was well defined. Now, to know more, the existing system was primarily the creation of a single electrical engineer. It had been written a symbol language for the microprocessor Intel 8080, which was state of the art at that time. Also, its switching systems in general. It uses the software that is very stringent real-time reliability and fault tolerance requirements. Switching systems use redundant hardware to achieve fault tolerance. Also, it's the architecture of the system. The system architecture is a conceptual model that defines structure and behavior and more views of a system. Switching systems in general is the case study. A telephone switching system is responsible for establishing and maintaining connections among telephone lines. Now we must see here the architecture of the system. At the right part of the screen, we can see the fault processing, the executive, the call processing, administration, and diagnostics, which is the architecture of the system. To know more about this, the executive is the subsystem switching systems or the operating system. It provides processing, memory, and time management facilities. It performs all the low-level machines operations such as interrupt processing. The executive allows the system to be used by the different subsystems simultaneously. Now, the call processing. This subsystem performs the main telephone switching operations. It supports the placing of a telephone call by detecting the lines going on and off and the numbers being dialed, providing the appropriate dial tones and connecting to the appropriate lines. The third one is administration. This subsystem maintains the information on the subscribers. It is basically a database that contains information about the numbers supported by the system. The fault processing is the subsystem that detects the malfunctions in the various subsystems and performs the steps necessary to recover for them. While the diagnostics is the subsystem that performs the diagnostic operations to locate the malfunction components and perhaps determine their cause, which can be run manually or automatically. Those are the architecture of the system of this case study. Now, to know more about this case study, We must also often see the new release. The requirements for each subsystem were given to the appropriate groups after the simulation was given by the integration testing groups, and after several months of the system was released. Next is the analysis. The software development for the switching system just described in fairly typical and of the large class of software engineering projects. The major factor that made the project successful was probably the presence of the original designers of the system. And the footnote, while the release just described was successful, we must add the problems inherent in the system. The unmanageability of large assembly language programs and the lack of formal or any case adequate specification and documentation. Switching systems in general, or this case study, the telephone switching system, is responsible for the establishing and maintaining the connections among the telephone lines. The next case study is the budget control system. Every company has a budget control activity devoted to mentoring its financial transactions and ensuring the correspondence with the original plans. In general, these transactions and plans are embedded in the company's annual budget. This case study describes the construction and evolution of the system that supports the budget control for a small high-tech company and also in the consulting of the software development business. The study followed the classic waterfall model primarily because the problem was well defined. Here we can see that the problem and its peculiarities. The main goal of the budget control is to understand whether the activities performed by a company are proceeding according to the original budget and forecast, so that appropriate decisions can be taken early if this is not the case. Now, the budget control activity is clearly related to other administrative services, such as payroll, processing, income, expense monitoring, inventory tracking, and tax planning payment. Here is an example of the spreadsheet of a report of a simplified budget control. Here we can see its invoices, its work in progress for every month and the previous month. Also the expenses of the manpower, of the administrative work and the software development and the hardware. Total give, and this means that the hardware depreciation costs attributed to the project for the given period. To know more, a more complete version, once the procedures and the risks related to budget control was better understood, more attention was paid to automating the process. Also, towards an integrated system, eventually, when the problem became fairly well understood, it was decided to integrate a budget control system into the company-wide information system. The final implementation included improvements to the existing database manipulation facilities of the BCP, or the budget control prototype. This was done in an incremental way, simply adding new functions. And our third case study is the Microsoft Synchronize and Stabilize process. Most of the initial investigations into software processes originated in the realm of the large software systems developed for mainframe-based architectures. So how does Microsoft stabilize their synchronization and stabilization process? Microsoft's philosophy for software development is based on decomposing projects into many small terms operating in parallel but still behaving as a single large development team. Here we can see the planning phase under development. In their planning phase, vision of the product, specification, and schedule is a must. Also in their development, they compose of two groups, the developers and the testers. Now, in the testers part, it is all continuous testing so that they can stabilize their softwares. Also, the process prescribers must prescribe daily synchronization and product stabilization. Those are the philosophy of the Microsoft company. The last case study is the open source approach. It regulates licensed software specifying its use, copy, modification, and distribution rights. Business that does not derive from selling software but rather from other indirect activities, services, accessories, and advertisement, and many more. To know more about this highly distributed process characterized by frequent iterations, it is widely availability of source code as known because it's an open source approach Also, openness to contributions from large community of developers. Enabling technology. First, internet. Because internet has a large scale and fast collaborations. Also, repositories with version control and configuration of management.
지리지리